On Sunday, May 4, 2003, Katie's brother returned home from graduation to find his mother in tears. Katie Autry was found around 4 a.m. when the fire alarm in her dorm went off. She was alone in her room, badly burned and barely alive. This is the story of the Katie Autry crime. Let's figure out what really happened to the girl. Katie Autry was born on May 10, 1984. In Kentucky, she had an unstable childhood due to her mother's mental illness. Katie and her sister were placed in foster care. The girl studied well. She was short, petite blonde. In preparation for college, Katie decided to attend Western Kentucky University to remain close to her adoptive and biological families. Katie began her freshman year in the fall of 2002 and enjoyed college life and the taste of independence, eventually meeting a good friend who became her roommate. They often went to parties and enjoyed drinking and having fun on campus. Katie was so overwhelmed by the turbulent youth life that at some point she received a not very pleasant nickname, the whore from the second floor. She was involved in a long-term sexual relationship with a guy named Maurice. However, Maurice had a girlfriend out of town and did not want a serious relationship with Katie. During her freshman year of college, Katie decided to break free from the Kentucky foster care system. She wanted to be independent, but it also meant she lost her college funds and had to find money on her own. She began looking for work and earning extra money. The girl even managed to work as an exotic dancer. On Saturday, May 23, 2003, Katie and her roommate were planning to attend a party. The girls had been drinking heavily beforehand, so when they finally arrived at the party, Katie was already drunk. She had a habit of crying and being dramatic when she was drunk, and her roommate often had to babysit her. Katie noticed Maurice and asked him to dance, but he refused. Katie got upset and started a fight with Maurice. She became aggressive and the fraternity leaders asked her to leave. One of the promises of the fraternity of this party was to take people home, and naturally it was assumed that Katie would be taken too. Her roommate was having fun and didn't want to leave. She promised to call Katie later. She also thanked the driver for taking Katie home. At 2:30 a.m., shortly after Katie left the party, her roommate called to check on her and make sure she was okay. Katie answered the phone and said she was in bed. Then she told her neighbor that there was a guy in her room and she got scared. She said she didn't know who this guy was. The unknown man himself called his roommate and said that it was he who brought Katie home. He said he wanted to make sure the girl got to her room because she was very drunk, and assured Katie's friend that everything was fine. Before hanging up, neighbor Katie, let's call her Sarah, thought she heard a second male voice in the room, but she wasn't too worried and told Katie she'd see her in the morning. About an hour and a half later, the fire alarm went off. This was not unusual in a college dorm and was often the result of someone burning the popcorn. The students filed out of the building, some half asleep and some still drunk. They assumed it was another false alarm until firefighters removed the badly burned body. Rescuers entered the dorm room and quickly located the source of the fire. Upon entering the room, the fireman said that the sprinkler had already put out the fire, but he saw something shiny on the bed. He didn't realize it was a person until he saw his chest rise. Lying on the bed was a severely beaten and burned Katie Autry. Her face was wrapped in a shirt and another piece of cloth was wrapped around the sprinkler system. It was clear that something terrible had happened to Katie. She was, in fact, a source of ignition. Someone set her on fire while she was alive. As they carried her out of the building, she told the firefighters to take me home. Katie had severe burns to her chest and genital area, and a can of hairspray was found, which turned out to be used as an accelerator. An alcohol gel was also placed inside Katie, presumably to eliminate any evidence of sexual assault. She was transferred to Vanderbilt Hospital in Nashville, Tennessee in critical condition. The doctors explained that Katie's burns were so severe that they probably destroyed most of her nerve endings, and this was something of a savior as it would greatly reduce her pain. Despite exceptional care, Katie was unable to survive her injuries and died a few days later on May 7, 2003. The police were trying to figure out why her roommate, Sarah, with whom she was always with, was not home that night. Sarah explained that she was with another friend that night, but told authorities about an ominous phone conversation between her, Katie, and an unknown man. Since the man said he was the one who brought her home, they needed to look at the designated driver. He was called in for an interview, but he denied knowing what happened to Katie after he dropped her off. They even questioned her boyfriend Maurice, but he had an alibi. They eventually returned to the driver who gave Katie a ride home after the party and learned that she was not the only person in the car. According to the driver, his friend Stephen Soules was with him that night. He was a resident of nearby Scottsville and did not attend university. He went to a party with friends, but was drunk and passed out in the back seat of the car. On the way back to the dorm, Katie teased Stephen about being sick and called him a sick boy. When Katie got out of the car, Stephen told his friend that he wanted to punish her and also followed her out. Stephen Soules was brought in for questioning. He was known in his communications as a liar and a thief. Stephen was a year or two older than Katie and was very lazy, didn't go to college, didn't work. He often hung out with other losers in Scottsville, Kentucky. He was called a jerk. He never got into serious trouble, but despite this he became famous as a liar, a cheat and a thief. Many people he interacted with did not trust him and considered him a freeloader. When Stephen was brought in for questioning, authorities learned that Stephen and a group of his friends had attended a fraternity party that evening. By the time the party started, the guys were very drunk. Stephen became ill and went home in his friend's car. He told investigators that on the way to the dorm, he and Katie kissed in the back seat. At first he refused to go up to her dorm room. The boyfriend later admitted that after she got out of the car, he followed her and snuck into her room before she closed the doors. According to him, the girl did not mind at all, and they made love. The more police talked to Stephen, the more he changed his story. He eventually told authorities that he did not harm Katie, but knew who did. He said that while he was with Katie in her room, his friend Lucas Goodrum called him and asked where he was. A little later, Lucas appeared in the dorm room and told Katie that he also wanted sex and wanted to join. According to Stephen, Katie answered no, and then Lucas attacked her. Stephen insisted that Katie resisted, but could not cope with Lucas, who was much larger. He then reported that he saw Lucas begin to kill Katie and set her on fire. In the spring of 2003, Lucas turned 21 years old. He, like Stephen, did not work anywhere, did not study anywhere. Lucas has been married before, divorced, and has a young son. His ex-wife claimed that Lucas constantly insulted and offended her. The day before the attack on Katie, Lucas was arrested on domestic violence charges against his then-girlfriend. The guy's mother married his stepfather several years ago, who turned out to be the heir to famous stores. Thus, the Lucas family had money and often supported the guy, while he refused to work and regularly used illegal substances. Lucas eventually moved to Scottsville with his father and stepmother. Stephen and Lucas were friends, but according to Lucas they often quarreled. Despite frequent quarrels, the guys agreed to spend the evening of May 3rd together and attend a party with other mutual friends. When Lucas was brought in for questioning, he remembered seeing Katie at the party, but denied going into her dorm room. Lucas did not know what happened to Katie and denied any involvement in the crime. His father and stepmother said that he was home at that time, that night, which provided him with an alibi. Authorities believed Stephen Soules' story. Police said they had no reason not to believe Stephen. As a result, Stephen and Lucas were arrested and charged with a crime of the first degree. They both faced the death penalty. While awaiting trial, DNA tests came. Despite attempts to use alcohol gel and burn the girl, biological material was still extracted from her. As a result, the DNA matched the biological material of Stephen Soules. Steven admitted to attacking Katie, but said he only did it after Lucas, and because Lucas threatened to take his life if he didn't. Given the lack of evidence against Lucas, authorities were not confident that they would achieve a conviction. Then they decided to offer Steven Souls a deal. Steven agreed to plead guilty to all charges, in exchange for Steven's death penalty being dropped. Steven, in turn, was also scheduled to testify against Lucas at the upcoming trial. In court, Steven once again changed his version. He still said that it was Lucas who attacked, beat and abused Katie. However, the guy claimed everything he did was Lucas's fault. It was his friend who forced him to do it. Steven said that he only used Katie on Lucas's orders, but Lucas set her on fire. But despite his testimony, Steven Souls was the only person whose DNA was found at the crime scene. Then he finally admitted to raping and setting Katie on fire, which led to her death. Lucas had an alibi for the night and vehemently denied any involvement. His DNA was not found at the scene and no evidence could directly link him to the crime. The only connection was that Steven Souls and a prison informant said so, who claimed that Lucas confessed to the crime in prison while awaiting trial. This was not enough for the jury. Lucas was found not guilty of all charges and was released. Katie's family were devastated and believe Lucas got away with his crimes. Steven Souls was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He remains with the Kentucky Department of Corrections to this day. He is now approximately 40 years old. A few years after the trial, Lucas was charged with domestic violence against his ex-wife. He moved to Texas and dropped out of the public eye. I have not been able to find out his current whereabouts. Although many people believe Lucas is guilty, there is not enough evidence. Dorm rooms had to be unlocked with a resident card key. Steven admitted that he followed Katie before the door closed behind her, but how Lucas could have gained access to the building later. Why wasn't his DNA found in Katie? Why Lucas had a 100% alibi? I understand that his parents' alibi may not be reliable, but many factors led the investigation to the fact that Steven was in deep trouble and wanted to point the finger at someone else for his heinous crime. Perhaps this or Lucas is still guilty and really was in this hostel. What do you think, friends? Even if he was involved in this crime, then, unfortunately, the investigation was unable to collect evidence confirming this, and this is sad. Some believe that Lucas was privileged because he could afford a better lawyer than his alleged accomplice. Regardless of opinions about the outcome of this case, one thing is certain: the students and faculty of this university are forever changed. Security protocols have been changed as a result of this horrific crime. Katie will never be forgotten by those who loved her and by people who never even knew her. Thank you for watching. I recommend watching other stories. Click right now, and also subscribe to my channel. See you soon.